Oak Sounds Bloom is a new take on intelligent equalizers and will likely become just as popular as their Soothe 2 plugin. So let's take an in-depth look at what it does, how it works, and of course, take a listen to its effect to see if it's worth the price. But before we start, if you want to get your mixes to sound like professional songs, I encourage you to check out our mixing and mastering membership. Just for signing up, you receive 10 free mastered songs per month with your own dedicated mastering engineer, unlimited mixing feedback, and access to Sage Audio University for in-depth mixing and mastering education courses. But more on that at the end of the video. Let's start by looking at Bloom's controls and functions. Now, for the sake of transparency, this video is not sponsored in any way. Now, Bloom is a multi-band intelligent dynamic EQ, similar to the Gullfoss EQ, but with the ability to fine-tune any changes. Now, the 4 bands aren't pre-emphasis bands, but instead control whether you want a region amplified or attenuated. For example, say Bloom was amplifying the low mids of an instrument, but I'd prefer less, I would lower the band, and it's pretty straightforward. Now, the center frequency of these ranges can be controlled, and the overall band can be disabled and soloed if you want to monitor it. Interestingly, at default settings, the plugin introduces a small boost to the lows and a couple of mild dips in the highs. With the amount dial, we can control how much tonal shaping can occur, with 7 and above causing an overall compression effect. At 7, there's a high threshold and a hard knee setting, and as we increase, the knee is softer and the threshold is lower. Now, the most traditional compression occurs around 8.7, while 10 is aggressive maximization and compression. However, the behavior does change depending on the incoming frequency. The attack and release behave like a traditional compressor. However, since the shaping is frequency specific, adjusting these also affects the overall frequency response. At the bottom, we have the squash calibration, and if the input is louder, but I want less compression, I could lower this. Or if the input is quiet and I wanted more compression, I could increase it. Now think of this as pre-compression gain emphasis or de-emphasis. Now we could adjust the wet signals level to match the LUFS of the original signal, adjust the mix amount and the output level and bypass, introduce filters if needed, and bypass the processing using high and low pass filters. Now we're going to take a look into the quality in stereo mode in a moment, but let's demo this plugin on a mix. I'm going to use 7 different instances of it with unique settings so that we could hear a mix before and after Bloom has been introduced. Next up, let's get into some more advanced Bloom settings. So at the bottom left, we have the quality and stereo mode. Starting with the quality, other than GPU, there isn't a downside to using higher settings. I was curious if the plugin introduces any pre-ringing distortion, but looking closer at the 3 settings, I didn't notice any additional signal, either before or after the test signal, to indicate pre-ringing distortion from any linear phase filters. Now moving on to stereo mode, we could use the default linked mode or control the mid-side or left-right channels. Now once that's split, we could trigger the processing by both channels and subsequently process them identically, or we could delink the detection to cause differing amounts of processing to the mid-side or left-right. Now what's cool is that the tonal bands could be altered for either the mid or side and could have their center frequencies set independently. So say I'm working on the kick and I want more of the lows, but only on the mid image. I could increase the mid image and center the frequency band on the fundamental while dipping the lows on the side image to keep it centered. And if I want to shift the processing slightly, I could, of course, adjust just the amount, or I could alter the focus to either the mid image or the side image, or somewhere in between. So let's take a listen to this example and notice how the kick becomes more centered and driving. Next, let's talk about sidechaining with Bloom. So similar to Soothe 2, we could sidechain competing signals. So say we insert Bloom on the bass and the kick is in the same range. It would be a bad idea to use the plugin on both with the same settings since they'd be shaped to sound the same and end up clashing. Instead, we'll sidechain the kick, enable sidechaining with the SC icon up top, and adjust as needed. Since we can control the bands, it's possible that this could lead to more problems, but it's going to be much less likely since the processing interacts with the opposing signal and it takes it into account. So let's listen and notice how it shapes the bass around the kick. So these are my final thoughts about Bloom. All in all, I think this is a really well-designed plugin that offers a lot more control than its counterpart, the Golfoss EQ. Its controls are simpler than those of Oak Sound's previous plugin Soothe 2, with fewer variables to consider, but I think that makes a lot of sense for what it's designed to do. Now, the only concern that I have is that, like Soothe 2, it'll be overused and misused by a lot of producers. Now, I can imagine a fair number of engineers sidechaining a vocal in the instrumental mix and just shaping the two around each other instead of trying to fix problems in the mix. That said, if the plugin is used as intended for dynamic tonal shaping, I think it's going to be really beneficial. But what are your thoughts? Do you plan on trying this plugin out for yourself? Share your ideas below. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to get your mixes to sound like professional songs, I encourage you to check out our mixing and mastering membership. Just for signing up, you receive 10 free mastered songs per month with your own dedicated mastering engineer, unlimited mixing feedback, and access to Sage Audio University mixing and mastering courses, which include start-to-finish walkthrough sessions for various genres and 35 multi-track sessions for hands-on practice. This platform is supported by our thriving community and tight-knit network of audio engineers, and every day we see and hear great wins in the membership from both new and seasoned engineers noticing a huge improvement in their mixes and masters after joining. Right now, you could join the membership with a 70% lifetime discount, bringing the cost down to just $15 per month. So join today and start creating mixes that sound like professional songs.